Great news, guys. Arcade1up is saved. They got $20 million. Woohoo! Or are they? Let's get into it. All right, guys, by now you probably have heard the news that Arcade1up has received a new loan from SLR. And if you haven't, we'll touch on that a little bit. Of course, we have Michael B rushing out there, and God love him, always looking at things optimistically with those rose colored glasses. I know 19K Fox is out there talking about it now, to making some really good points, but we are going to take you through this. We're going to explain exactly what it means from a business perspective. I'm going to give you some examples to go with it. And then we are going to look at Arcade1up and what this really means for that company and for us. So let's just get into it first and start talking about the article itself. And again, I want to thank everybody for dropping by. Of course, we got the Cornercade who dropped in early, Jason, the best moderator in the business, Zero Redux, Paul Mindeman, Bo Knows Tecmo, and everybody else watching along. I really appreciate being here. Of course, I'm just going to blow through this because this has been covered quite a bit, this article piece. SLR Business Credit provides $20 million line of credit to tastemakers. So what does that mean straight off? Doesn't mean they got 20 million. It means they can borrow up to 20 million. So they haven't got it yet, but they could get that much if they wanted. The creators of Arcade1up, fourth largest brand in gaming, fourth largest hardware brand in gaming. SLR Business Credit is pleased to announce the funding of $20 million credit facility for a leading manufacturer in the gaming industry, Tastemakers. Tastemakers has licensing agreements and development deals with iconic retro arcade games and manufacturers cabinets, bring gaming to the home around the world. The financial support is aimed at bolstering the company's working capital. Again, working capital, think cash flow. The credit facility, structured as a $20 million accounts receivable facility, has executed in partnership with equity holders and management to meet the needs of the company, which has been facing changes in working capital needs. So the big key there is it was in partnership with the equity partners and the management of the company. So think mid-cap financial is they're heavily involved in this. Dora DeVere, interim CEO and CEO of Tastemakers, or CFO of Tastemakers, which is interesting because I don't believe she's interim anymore. She is the full CEO and has been for a while. Says, we are excited to join the SLR family, and we plan to use this facility to support our customer credit needs. Finding the right solution was a project that we were very thoughtful about, since the customers and their support are key to our success. With ever-changing retail landscape, SLR stepped up and created a solution that really answers our business needs. Not to mention, this will allow us to get back to making video games. I will bet dollars to donuts that this statement was actually written by SLR and just approved by Arcade1up for their statement. It is a very pro SLR business sounding statement. I doubt this is a direct quote. There's a little bit of spin involved here, but knowing what I know about typically when a company wants to push this kind of publicity and tie themselves to another company, this is likely written by them. And I'll talk a little bit about why Arcade1up probably wasn't too thrilled with this news going out, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Our biggest concern is meeting the company's needs while also being able to balance our requirements, said Dan Tortoriello, EVP and CEO of CLR Business Credit. We were able to do this with this transaction when others could not. Likely, the $20 million line is a pretty hefty one for these kinds of companies. So that could be what they're talking about when they say others couldn't meet it. There could be something else, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. This was done in collaboration with Erica Delano, principal at SLR Capital Partners. The combined effort resulted in creative solution To meet the company's current and anticipated needs, we look forward to a mutually beneficial relationship. Okay, let's get this off the screen. And a bunch of you have just joined, so I appreciate that. Got Ted Adam Green, thanks for joining. Doug Wynn, Ted Adam, Richie Cavs, a Retrocade, Mikey Yoon. Did Captain D's get their money back? Indeed. Darren Kane, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Let me check if they fully paid me out of unused vacation. Maybe you're hitting the nail on the head there. Borrow 20 million, release Smash TV, House of the Dead. Oh, if only. Hello, Bumper Squid. And this seems more like a double down to try and turn a profit. KFB says, so you're telling me there's a chance? Yes, stupid fat hobbit, says Zero. Up to 20 million, he's going to have so many checks and balances. Let's see. They got to do this to do their investment back, which is disturbing. We'll talk a little bit about that. They'll have to pay this in a year, and it's temporary Band-Aid. Partially, it could also be something completely different. So we'll talk about that. And Jim, the Pacers fan, thanks for dropping by. Goofyfoot, thanks for dropping by. By the way, Goofyfoot, I put a red trucker hat out there. However, I think it looks terrible. Just so you know, I need to remake a graphic that will make the black look good on the red. So I will fix it at some point. So as CEO, can you explain how you secured this loan? No, so future CEO, the next president and CEO of Arcade1up. Loan? Did they have anything to do with your new merch? It may have. And do you have plans to get more loans? That's awesome. Well, we'll talk about all the plans for Arcade1up on Saturday's show when I unveil Agenda 1Up. But for now, let's talk about the nitty gritty here. Give me 1 second. What just happened? Share screen. As always, if we're going to do some edumacation, I come prepared. And got to get my controls. All right, so that's the article, yada, yada. So let's talk about what is AR financing, accounts receivable financing, more commonly known in the industry and in business circles as factoring. So what factoring is, and some of you likely know this, but what factoring is when a company, let's say you're a manufacturer like Arcade1up, when you sell a product to a wholesaler, you don't get the cash for that order right away. Generally, you have some sort of payment terms with that wholesale customer. So it could be COD. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we'll talk about what those terms can be in just a second. But essentially what you're doing is you're selling, when you record that amount owed, the accounts receivable, that is counted on your balance sheet as an asset. And so what factoring companies do is they will buy that asset from you in exchange for making you a loan. So in this case, let's say it's $20 million. They will give Arcade1up $20 million. They'll charge some fees and some interest on top of that. And then they take over that liability on their books, and they are in charge of getting the wholesale customer to pay them. But this isn't retail, because Arcade1up doesn't sell to retail. This is essentially, because we know Alliance Entertainment is now their exclusive wholesaler, this is a deal where SLR is advancing them money on the amounts owed to Arcade1up by Alliance Entertainment. And so before we jump into the types of payment terms people can have, big shout out to Kevin Clausen. Thank you very much for the super chat, who is throwing $2 into the campaign funds to make Arcade1up great again. Appreciate the support, Kevin Clausen. Port of Dreams says James has the receipts. Yeah, So let's move on to payment terms. So as I mentioned, when you have an record that accounts receivable, it means you as a company have extended credit to your customer. In this case, Arcade1up extends credit to Alliance Entertainment. Now, there are different types of payment terms. You have COD, which means when I ship you something, once you receive it, you have to pay me instantly. Most often, this is very small companies. So think your mom and pop comic shops, toy stores, record stores, the very small, mom and pop shop. They're typically going to be on COD if they are a newish company and don't have an established credit with a wholesaler. That's a good example of COD. These big companies rarely are ever on COD unless they have really bad credit for some reason, but that doesn't happen. So typically, a manufacturer is going to extend something like net 30, net 60, or in some cases, net 90 to the wholesaler, which means that company, once they receive a good in their warehouse, they have 30 days to pay the manufacturer, 60 days to pay the manufacturer, 90 days to pay the manufacturer. So because Arcade1up in this case has extended credit, given them goods that Arcade1up has paid for, but not gotten any money in exchange, that creates a gap in their cash flow. They've got all this money tied up in the manufacturing and they're getting nothing in return because they have extended credit to Alliance. So this is where a AR loan or factoring can help them get that money back to use for whatever business purpose they need in a much faster turnaround. There are positives and negatives to this. But AR financing, right, isn't the only type of financing available to companies. It is one of four. It is more often used in places like manufacturing, but it's I would say it's somewhat common, but it's probably the least common of these four big terms. You have traditional bank loans. I just go and I take out a $25 million business loan from the bank. You've got a line of credit. You go and say, a company says, we deem you a credit worthy. Here's basically a credit card. You can go charge it up. When you charge it up, you got to pay it back and you give us interest. So somewhat you could think of like an Amex card, a traditional Amex card. When you charge it, a business charges it, they have to pay it at the end of the month and they pay a fee on top of that along with some interest. And the third is equity financing. And this is something we've seen Arcade1up do, right? Their original round of financing was equity financing. Now, it wasn't a straight equity where here's money for your equity and you just get it. It was an equity loan. So not only did they give them equity, but they also took the debt and had to pay interest back to the borrowers. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. And before we get to the next stop, let's see here. I lost my mouse again. It says, did Cyrus put up his car for collateral? That's the great thing. And it's a great point, Calvin, is with an AR loan factoring, you don't put up collateral because the AR balance is the collateral, right? So you have this purchase order from Alliance Entertainment, that is your collateral. So in that sense, it's a great for a business because a business doesn't have to back it up with their assets. They back it up with that debt that somebody else owes them. Says Kevin Claus says James is about to tell us when we can expect to see more cabs at Ollie's. Let's see. Says Cyrus rides a Huffy. You just kind of blow through here quickly. Just in, Arcade1up used $20 million to produce 50,000 Street Fighters. Quartercade says, what in the world is going on here? Biggie D, thanks for dropping by. And then we got some laughs. So next phase of your lesson here is the good stuff. I'm going to give you an example of how AR financing, otherwise known as factoring, works. So sit back and enjoy. Hopefully your heads don't explode with this example. I know how uncompelling this will be, but I think it's important to share for those of you that don't really have a full grasp of what this is. Like I said, I know many of you do, but a lot of you probably don't. And all right, so try to make it so you can actually see it. So here we're going to take a look at Arcade1up's balance sheet. And for the sake of this, I've made this super easy. We're going to use nice round numbers. We're going to pretend like here it is, January 1 of 2024, and Arcade1up has this nice clean balance sheet where they basically have nothing on it. They just have $10 million dollars in cash sitting in their bank account. That's what Arcade1up has, right? So then what is it? Wish this stayed big on when I do it once. So hopefully you guys can see that. So then on January 10th, Arcade1up purchases $10 million in crystal castles from their manufacturer in China. Now, just like Alliance Entertainment, Arcade1up does not have to pay this money right away. So what they need to do is they need to recognize the expense to manufacturing that they've paid $10 million for this allotment of game. And then they also need to recognize the liability. This is double accounting. You don't really need to dive too much into it, but I think it's important you understand this kind of principle. So Arcade1up at this moment has not spent a dime, but they have their order in and these cabs are being manufactured. So they have to recognize that they owe this money on their balance sheet because your debts and your liability, sorry, your assets and your liabilities always have to equal out. So you're going to recognize that you got these cabs, but you owe the money. And so the next transaction you're going to see is Arcade1up again now selling these cabs to Kokum. So they've got $10 million worth of crystal castles and they've sold them to Kokum for $20 million. And so they have to recognize now the 20 million in sales. Hey, it looks like you got 20 million in cash. Problem is they didn't receive any cash, but in accrual financing, they need to show that they earned some revenue, even though they don't have the money for it. So to show they don't have the money for it, they credit their accounts receivables to show, hey, we're owed $20,000 by our or $20 million by our customer. So it's looking pretty good right now, right? I've got 10 million in the bank, I've got 20 million in sales. I'm Arcade1up. I'm thinking, yeah, this rocks. I'm kicking butt. And then comes February 10th. 30 days later, man, this is annoying. So 30 days later, I now owe that $10 million. My net 30 terms to my manufacturer is due. So I have to cut a check to the manufacturer as Arcade1up for $10 million. Now, holy crap, I have no money. I'm broke. I'm owed $20 million to my partner, Alliance Entertainment, but I gave them really good terms because they're my one and only supplier, and they helped me out of a situation earlier this year with my supply chain problem. So I signed an exclusive deal with them and gave them beautiful net 90 terms. What am I going to do? I can't go for 2 months with no money. I'm screwed. I can't pay my employees. I can't pay my rent. I can't pay my taxes. I can't pay anything. And so I need cash, right? And so what Arcade1up has chosen to do is engage a company for factoring. And that's our, of course, final transaction. And I kind of show a reflection here where essentially, because they've got this $20 million, well, the 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 lender isn't likely just to give them straight $20 million. They're likely to give them $20 million minus some fees, minus some interest. So the thing to remember about factoring in AR loans, typically the interest is much higher than a traditional loan, because they're very short term. Now it may be interest like 5% or even 2%, but it's per month, right? So that you can imagine that interest is massive when you're talking about annual percentage rates about 8.5 or 8.75%. So now my $20 million has been reduced to 18 million. And we haven't even gone into cost of goods sold or anything like that. But this is just, I wanted to give you kind of a brief little picture of what this looks like on your sheet. Then we technically have borrowed this money. So we need to account for it in some way, because what happens if Alliance Entertainment doesn't pay? Well, Arcade1up is still on the hook. Now, they won't go to Arcade1up right away. They'll hound Alliance Entertainment, hoping to get the money out of them. But if Alliance Entertainment just shuts down, goes out of business, they are still going to turn to Arcade1up and say, you got to pay us back that money at this massive interest rate. So keep in mind the danger that factoring can put you in with cash flows. So that's briefly it. So let's jump back into our lovely, lovely PowerPoint and wrap that up as we talk about more about the rest of the info here. So why do you do factoring? What are the benefits, right? It gives you immediate cash flow. You don't have to, we talked about this kind of, you don't have to wait 90 days for that $20 million. I can get a percentage of that right now and start using it to run my business. That is great. And for a lot of companies, that is a very important part of keeping the business running, keeping it operating. So factoring is not unusual in any way, especially in manufacturing, but it doesn't it's not all roses. So the second benefit is factoring finance requires no collateral. So that means I don't have, if I'm Arcade1up, I don't have to give this new financial partner equity like I did with Center Partners back in the day. I get to keep all my equity, no risk there. I don't have to put up my businesses, my stock, my inventory, nothing. I just take on the loan and use the POs I have from uh, Alliance as the collateral. The other thing is the debt is based on sales. So presumably SLR has done some analysis here, right? One, they have a PO in all likelihood. Alliance Entertainment has purchased a specific order. Alliance Entertainment has a history of paying all their bills to Arcade1up. So this is a viable risk to SLR. They can say, look, they've placed the order with you. They have a history of paying you. We deem this fairly low risk for us. So here's your money. Have a nice day. This is great. We all get paid, and you sacrifice quite a bit of your profits in order to improve your cash flow. So that's the benefits. Really good for a lot of businesses that are cash starved. So what are the negatives, right? I kind of mentioned this early. Cost is a huge negative. These loans tend to be much more expensive because they are short-term loans. The shorter the loan, the more interest, the more fees that go along with it. It's dependent on a third party paying. So while technically the debt is Arcade1up's, you're relying on Alliance Entertainment to pay that bill. If they don't pay that bill, Arcade1up, you have to pay it, in addition to what other fees and stuff happen. So then what's the last one, right? The last real big negative is the potential impact on your customer relationship. You have to trust, if you're Arcade1up, that SLR isn't going to blow up the phones at Alliance Entertainment, that they're not going to be predatory, that they're not going to hound them daily until they pay that bill. Where you, as a valid partner with them prior to taking on a factor agreement, might have provided some more leeway with Alliance Entertainment than maybe you would other companies because they're such a good partner. They've been around for a long time with you. You may have said, "Hey, if you don't pay exactly on 90 days, we're okay with that if you floated an extra 10 or 15 and we won't charge any interest or late payments," because it's just you're good partners and you understand the relationship. But you think SLR is going to do that? Absolutely not. They're there to collect the amount they owed. So you really have to trust that they are not going to harass your one and only wholesale customer, right? That's a huge risk. Huge. Vendor relationships, especially when you're exclusive, like Arcade1up has thrown all their eggs into one basket. So they really have to trust that SLR isn't going to, uh, you know, what is it? Piss in the well, I guess. That they're not going to spoil that whole relationship. So that's kind of the gist. That's the background on what factoring is. I think it's important you understand what AR financing is, how it works. So hopefully you guys understood that. I want to big shout out and a thank you to Richie Cavs Retrocade for the super chat. He says James deserves this for doing a teaching stream. James, for the books, make sure to defer this revenue. Absolutely. Yeah, don't worry. Like there's some factoring there involved with with, or I should say, YouTube got themselves some nice net terms, right? And they take a huge fee for doing it, but I love it. So that's the background. I wanted to give you at least the financial background. Again, I really tried to dumb it down, and it's not an insult, but to make it easy to explain and jam pack a bunch of information in one little digestible package. So hopefully that's clear. It's pretty the gist, right? Like somebody owes you money, you're selling the fact that they owe you money to somebody for money, just to boil it down to the TLDR. So what what does this actually mean for Arcade1up? And what can we read into this based on their past? And so I'm going to kind of go through just quickly. Close this out. Right. So I got a couple more quick just links to show you. Okay. So first up is the old financing, right? So in October 2020, this was announced where Arcade1up took out that equity loan from Center Partners. It's important to kind of call out here, if you'll notice who that administrative agent is of this deal between Disruptive and Center Partners for this original equity loan, happened to be Midcap Financial. So I want you to remember that name, Midcap Financial, because it's going to come into play a minute. This was the original debt equity financing that Arcade1up took on. This is what gave them that original shot of cash that allowed them to produce so many calves, to do all the things that all the experimentation they did, from moving to just the 3/4 scale to the risers to the XLs to the head-to-heads, all those weird different products they were throwing against the wall to see what would stick. This deal made that happen. This gave them the liquidity and the cash to do it. So this was great. They were a rising star. Sales were taking off. They were getting awards at CES and Toy Fair for being the toy of the year. Amazing, amazing stuff. But a year goes by. Let's see. A year goes by and they find themselves needing to restructure their debt. The deal they made, they weren't able to either meet, or there were some other benefit that they needed. They needed to get out of that debt equity loan. And so then they worked with Midcap Financial to restructure the debt. So again, here's Midcap. Why are they restructuring? How did they first brokered the deal and now they're buying it up and restructuring it. So now suddenly the debt is moved over to Midcap. And so now you have these equity partners, of course. And what happens? This is in November of 2021, so a little over a year later. If you fast forward to 2023, what happens? Midcap seizes control of Arcade1up. They oust the CEO, Scott Bacharach. They oust John D., the king of licensing, and they take control. They put in Dora as the interim CEO and keep her in control. So now Midcap is really the company that is behind. This is the equity partner that is behind this whole thing. They're the ones who picked the new management team to run the company. They're behind it. They're the ones who have made the decision to move to factoring. But before we get to that, I wanted to point something else out as we were looking through these and reminiscing about these old financial moves that Arcade1up has done over the years. Is this company? Let's see. Intrepid advises disruptive. So back in the original debt financing, we have this announcement from Intrepid, and Intrepid talks about, hey, he's a financial advisor for Disruptive. He helped connect them to Center Partners Management. He's worked with Tastemakers and Scott Bacharach for 30 years. And who's the head of this Intrepid advising team? A guy named Mike Rosenberg. Mike Rosenberg. Where have I heard that name before? It sounds really familiar. Rosenberg. I just can't put my finger on it. But anyway, this takes us to the deal with Alliance Entertainment. So they've restructured the deal with Midcap in order to get the access to take over the company. Midcap now is the equity partners that control Arcade1up. Earlier this year, again, something a lot of people have a lot of optimism for. And I cautioned against some of that optimism because I was reading through the lines, right? So again, this is the announcement that Arcade1up has gone exclusive with Alliance Entertainment. There's a lot of hope that suddenly Alliance is going to drop ship things for customers. Problem is, Alliance has been doing the drop shipping from the very beginning for some of their retail partners. Not all of them, but some of them. So they've always had that ability, yet Arcade1up has never taken action on it. That's a core service that Kokum has offered and has for years. But besides all that, what I want to do is take you down to the statement from Dora about this deal, right? This great exclusive arrangement between Alliance Entertainment, aka the parent company of Kokum. Says the entire Arcade1up team is absolutely thrilled to solidify our Alliance partnership. Alliance is reliable and the staff is truly an extension of ours. We rely on the Alliance team to develop retail relationships and assist us with new opportunities. Alliance has the ability to service our entire fan base throughout North America, and they are positioned to help grow. And most importantly, Alliance is flexible during our busy times, ensuring we are in stock for our customers, said Dora DeVere, CEO of Tastemakers. We have overcome a lot of challenges recently. And as we've improved our supply chain, we were able to rely on alliance to be a part of the solution. That is the key, right? This one sentence is the entire key. It is the thing you need to be paying attention to. We have overcome a lot of challenges recently, and as we improved our supply chain, we were able to rely on alliance to be part of the solution. We have finally found a partner that allows us to focus and do what we do or do what we love, make video games. So what does that mean? We had supply chains issue and we were able to rely on alliance to get us through that. Well, it likely means, and I tried to explain this back then, that alliance funded the order. I'm wondering if they didn't fund the order to build the Costco order, that Arcade1up didn't have the cash to go out and get the manufacturer to assemble the Golden Tee Midway to build the Miss Pac-Man Galaga pub table. And in order to fill that big order, a huge order for Arcade1up, right? 13,000 of one cab, 9,500 of the other. That's a big order. And Arcade1up didn't have the ability to do it. And here is Alliance Entertainment likely stepping in. Again, this is just opinion, reading through the lines, knowing what is going on with Arcade1up this year, that they don't have a lot of product out there this year like they did last year, where they released like 13 new items, 14 new items. This year we've had 5 total, and that includes the 2 Costco orders. So their cash flow is all over the place. We've heard rumors that they're having issues with one of their licensors, right? One of the video game companies, so that they may, I don't know what that relationship is, but they potentially may owe somebody a lot of money. They may not. They may owe still money back to the equity partner from the debt restructuring. Who knows? But so take this for what it is. It seems like Alliance Entertainment helped them fulfill an order. So now what? Now they're likely still cash flow starved. They got an advancement from them, got the order out. They got the sales on it, but they still don't have extra cash, right? So now they're going and saying, we need more cash. Like, we are running cash. Our cash flow is a mess. Like, we need cash so that we can fund new orders, because the reason we haven't released anything is because we just don't have the money to do it. We don't have the money to front building a new cab and waiting, 30, 60, 90 days for the return on that cab. So we need to do something. So they turn to this factoring. So again, I want to point out who is running the company right now. The equity partners. It's a huge venture capital company. They're in the business of making loans. Yet they're choosing not to make a loan, not to make an additional investment into Arcade1up. And instead are telling Arcade1up, you need to go to SLR and you need to engage a factoring company. You need to get an AR loan. That's what you need to do to overcome your cash flow issues. That seems weird, right? You're a huge venture capital firm with tons of cash, some big giant fund backing you up. Why wouldn't you front your own company the money, right? Your own, subsidiary or company that you have a giant equity stake in. Do they maybe deem Arcade1up too big of a risk to loan them their own money? It's hard to say, but it's definitely a question we should be asking, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I do want to take a step back, because 2020 and 2021 are not today. 2020 and 2021 interest rates were at an all-time low, right? All-time low. 3%, under 3%. Money was flowing from the Fed to big banks that were just making loans to anybody. And these VC companies, these capital management companies, all doing the same thing. Money is it's raining down from the heavens, and the printing presses are at full speed over at the Fed. Fast forward to today, we're at 8.75% interest. We have some hope maybe that the Fed will grant us a small reprieve over the next 3 quarters, but there's no guarantee. So the cost of capital is now way higher, way higher. So giving the benefit of the doubt, maybe they just don't want to saddle Arcade1up with a giant interest rate loan right now. And short-term factoring makes a little more sense to overcome cash flow issues. That is definitely a positive spin on it, right? Because that's the reality of right now. Interest rates are insane, and here is a way to get some money into Arcade1up without taking on too much high interest debt. Even though the cost of an AR financing is much more expensive, they're very short term, so overall money is a lot less. So there's that. So that definitely could be a factor in why they would choose factoring, no pun intended. The other option, again, you don't have to loan Arcade1up money. You don't have to have Arcade1up go out and take a loan from a bank or some other venture firm or capital management company. You could just buy more equity in Arcade1up, couldn't you? Like, make another investment in exchange for more equity. So why doesn't MidCap want to do that either? So again, another question. They don't value the remaining equity enough to inject capital in it. Do they not think Arcade1up has a future where they want to invest more and get a bigger control of the company? Or are they just happy with where they're at? So that's another question of why aren't they doing some other sort of investment that keeps Arcade1up from taking on more money? And then I'll present you a final option, which I've been talking about on this channel for almost a year. So basically, since I started streaming really about 9 months ago, 10 months maybe at this point. And that is, if you're trying to shape a company into its best possible financial position, you want to beef up its cash flow. You want it to have lots of cash on hand. You want to reduce its debt as much as possible, right? Get that debt low, get that cash high, make it look really healthy on paper. Looks great. Why do you do that? Because you're trying to sell it. And maybe, just maybe, MidCap is looking to offload Arcade1up, right? Is that what's happening? I surmise, my opinion, that's a highly likely scenario. You've got the doom and gloom that Arcade1up is really in trouble and nobody wants to loan them money, so they have no choice but to go to a factoring company. And while factoring is common, it's a common thing, it's the equivalent of a debt collector, right? You give them the debt, they go collect it. Now, it's nicer, it's got a fancier name, factoring, right? But it's essentially it's a fancy business financing debt collector. That's what it is. They're not as predatory as typical collection agents and debt collectors, but that's what they do. They make you a loan on the money, they go out and collect it because you have good sales, you have reliable customers that pay, so you're low risk. So it's a nicer debt collector, but it is what it is. So that's the really negative. They're just screwed. Then there's the positive that I think the more optimistic, not so optimistic like Michael B, that they're flush with cash and they're just going to rain down Robotron 2084s and Q*berts on all of us. But rosy in that they think they can get it looking good enough on paper with all the sales they have, with their rankings as the number 4 manufacturer, that they can get the cash up, the debt looking good enough compared to cash, that debt to equity ratio looks really attractive for someone to take over, someone to make an investment and buy MidCap out of their position. That is what I suspect is actually happening. we are looking at mid cap trying an exit strategy and to get out of Arcade1up. So that might be a good thing, right? If we had this investment in new leadership. So I want to pause a minute here and say thank you, Console Fanboy, for the $10 super chat. Really appreciate. It says in 2026, when MetaQuest 4 comes out, everyone will be playing arcades in VR and it will look and feel incredible. All games will go digital, even arcade machines. Thought you knew VR is the future. Yeah, and there is some great VR arcades out there already that are really cool. Once you have that haptic feedback and can feel the resistance in the controller in your hand, it will be awesome. Kevin Gloss says, where's Bain Capital when you need them? Yes, somebody called Mitt Romney today. We need Bain Capital. Andy's showroom says, hey, if I can get a Q-Bird out of the deal, I'm happy. Darren Kane says they're not gonna rehire me, probably. So hey Darren, as you know, I'm the next CEO and president of Arcade1up. I announced my campaign this past weekend to be the next CEO and president of Arcade1up. So James Hates Everything 2024, we are going to make Arcade1up great again. And you never know who might get hired when my administration takes over. Goofyfoot says, now you're teasing. Is real gaming. James hates everything but loves his fans. Indeed he does, and that's a good point. Smash the like button. I don't know how that connects, but in my mind it did. So smash the like button. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate all you being here. And BD says number 4 company in gaming. It's number 4 company in gaming hardware. So that is a big difference, right? We have some huge video game studios that do more in a year than Arcade1up will do in their lifetime. But in hardware sales, it's, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, Arcade1up. So you got to give them their hat, but you also have to realize there's not a lot of money in hardware. The margins are super thin. And so, forget 50%. Like my example showed them spending 10 million to get 20. No, you're probably lucky if they spend 17.5 million to get 20 million. And they have that small 2.5 million margin over their cost of goods sold. Now they're giving a big chunk of that to this AR company, which means their profit margins are getting even smaller. But at least it looks good on paper from the debt to equity ratios. New sucker is born every 3 seconds. Biggie is right. Arcade1up needs a parent company like Xbox has Microsoft to give them 50 billion. The problem with that is, right, like all these companies have been buying up all these other companies. The second they do, they give you about a year and then they lay everybody off and shut the company down. That seems to be the current trend. If you don't hit a home run with your first thing, you're out. James is going to make more in profit from his hat business than A1up. Higher PD7. There you go. Stock Jock says, if 1UP thinks they will be flush with cash shortly, then a factoring loan might work out, because if they pay it back early, you can get a discount on the loan. Indeed. A1UP can't even make a hat and stock it on their website. Yes, indeed. And Zero Redux, again, big thank you for the support and the super chat. He says, make A1UP great again. How do you say that? Ma 1UP-ga? Kevin Clausen, another super chat, another big thank you. Shout out to Kevin. I'm counting you to hire me. Chicago works that way. Yeah, I mean, hell, if you're out in Chicago, right, I want all the voters out there early, vote often. You know how it works. Get that machine going, Kevin. And then we've got Jim the Pacers fan dropping in a $4.99 super sticker, which it doesn't tell me what it is, and I don't actually have the YouTube going, but I bet it's awesome, because that's just the kind of guy Jim the Pacers fan is. So thank you very much for the super sticker, Jim. Kevin York says, one step below the bronze. Yeah, number 4. They're just off the podium. They're like that Australian breakdancer chick. They can't even give a hat to prize winners. No, but to be fair, I do have the one and only hat they actually produced and gave to people, right? You just had to pay out the ass for a game that wasn't ready yet to get that beautiful, beautiful hat. In summary, A1up. Oh, sorry. Got to click on Jason's message. In summary, A1up will be bringing us classic favorites such as Puyon, only uphill from here. Hopefully so. I wish Nintendo did arcades. God, don't we all, Alfred? Don't we all? And Kevin Clausen says G, and Zero Redux says it's a laughing pear. Well, there you go. That's even better. Who doesn't love pears, especially laughing ones? So yeah, so that's my take. That's my breakdown, going through kind of the financing history of Arcade1up, some of the public information we have about the deals we've been saying. It's all just opinion based on some of the economics of the situation and what we know. I'm super interested in your guys' take. Of course, if you weren't able to join us live, would love to hear the comment below. Of course, if you are here, would love to know what you think. Not going to throw up a poll or anything, so just spit them out. What do you think? Is this positive? Is it, you have the Michael B take that we've got Arcade1up now is 20 million in cash, and here comes all those good games. Tron XL, love that, Biggie. God, would we love that. Star Wars XL is right around the corner. They're finally going to fix the audio issues with Dragon's Lair. We're going to get all the good stuff. Not only are we going to get Golden Tees, we're going to get Golden Tee 4 finally and make the world happy. Or is it doom and gloom? Are they broke? Are they about to just go away? They don't have the cash. They're just doing everything they can to survive with the hopes of making it to 2025 and having some big new revelation save the company. Or are they setting themselves up in the best possible way to sell, to get themselves absorbed by another company? I wish I had teed it up. I wish I had it here, but I found a great interview from the CEO of Atari about their acquisition strategy. Again, this is a company I have talked about for a long time as I think the only viable company to make an investment into Arcade1up. Though Arcade1up sales numbers are huge, absolutely huge. So I don't know if Atari actually has the capital to do it that large, but it just makes sense, right? Atari is making so many investments. We've talked about the big ones. We've talked about Antstream. We've talked about them buying Intellivision. We've talked about their major investment in saving the Polymega. They've also purchased entire studios. They went out recently and purchased the rights and royalties back from the studio that had the rights to Roller Coaster Tycoon. They're buying studios. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but the studio that made the Atari 50th collection, who has actually made some great games, they went out and bought them. They've bought several other game development studios that are producing modern retro or re-release retro for all different kinds of consoles, not just the Atari. They went and bought Atari Age to support the homebrew market. Atari is full force going into retro, the love and selling retro, right? They're an apparel company, they're a retro hardware, they're a software company. And in this interview, and maybe I'll share this interview on Saturday so we can talk about it more, but in this interview, the CEO of Atari talks about their strategy. And so a lot of people are concerned with some of these companies that they're buying, that they will make those companies do nothing but Atari stuff, or they will basically ruin some of these beloved companies. And That's not their strategy at all. If honestly, it so reminds me of Arcade1up. It's insane. So their strategy is what they do is they come in, they make investments of these companies that they have true uh they love what they're doing, they want to help them do more. And yeah, they take over the HR, they take over the billing, they take over other mundane administrative tasks so that these companies can focus exactly on what they do and what they do best. The other thing that Atari does is they connect them with other licensors. So not only will Atari get licenses to these companies for Atari brands, but because Atari has connections with all the big video game companies, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, you name it, right? Everybody's done business with Atari in some way. They leverage those to get licensings to these other companies. So imagine Atari has an equity stake or actually owns Arcade1up outright. Not only would you get all these great Atari classic cabs, that System 1 stuff that Fox was just talking about, might we probably get a Road Blasters, we might get an actual Super Sprint, all those great Atari cabs we haven't got yet, Marble Madness, you name it. But because of their relationships with all these other companies, they could help secure licensing deals for things we couldn't dream of getting before. And so, to me, the dream company to take over Arcade1up would be Atari. So, I lean and I hope optimistically that this deal with SLR is about improving that debt to equity ratio so that they can make an acquisition more feasible, more fundable. That's my hope. That's my optimistic view. My more pessimistic view is this is another sign that Arcade1up is in big trouble. So that's my two takes. And I'm going to lean a little bit more optimistic, but because I think without an investor or somebody taking them over, the pessimistic side is going to happen and that they're going to be in big trouble um, sooner rather than later. But we'll see. It just depends. Like, they make no qualms about what this money's for, right? They don't tell you. It could be just socking cash away. It could be could be because they need to pay employees. It could be because they need to fund a new order. We just don't know, right? We don't have inside. Kevin Wan says, Biggie D, you have the Atari Game Station Pro. My arcade has the Atari Mega coming out. Absolutely. That's a great looking thing. Atari can make a deal with ThinkUp for much cheaper. That's the flip side, Mickey, right? Is that, or Mikey? I don't know why I keep reading your name as Mickey. God, I've done that now like 2 straight days in a row. I know it's Mikey Yoon, but I can't pronounce it right in my stupid head. But so Mikey, yeah, I mean that's the big thing. If that's why they need this debt to equity ratio to look good. Because if Arcade1up still has this massive debt on the books, and we have no evidence that they do, we've no evidence that they haven't paid it. We just have rumors that says they still owe big money on the debt financing and the restructuring. But assuming that's the case, you're right. Why on earth would Atari make the investment and take on so much debt? They won't. That's why you need a good debt to equity ratio that makes it absorbable to your own investors and Atari's board to make that investment. And so there's that. And since it's a private company, we have no way of knowing what that actually is. We get some insights. I've shared some of those when we get insights like the ThinkUp lawsuit. We're getting some information out of that of what their sales look like. So we get glimpses here and there, but none of us truly know because we can't see all that private information, but it's out there. I assume talking about that game station. Let's see. He says, I really like to see Atari buy them up. Imagine getting a Berserk cab. Oh man, absolutely. Frenzy, Berserk. Mikey Mouse. And I appreciate that, Mikey. Ask Paul Mindeman. He's been named so many times by Michael B and others. It's the joy of YouTube, I guess. Biggie says, I want to see what the games list is and what the UI looks like on the game station. And Kevin says, I was going to buy one up for millions. I would do my research first. These people aren't dumb, right? They're going to do the research, but you know, they have generally they're going to see that. That doesn't mean they're looking at it as bad. It's a normal capital financing thing. You do. It's not abnormal, right? So an investor isn't going to look at that and go, "Hey, you did factoring and to make your debt to equity ratio look better." That's totally normal, right? They're not going to look at that as a major risk. What they're going to do is look at it and say, what is the potential if we have it, right? Because you get things like that's my example of why I gave the example of Atari. Right now, Arcade1up has to have an HR department. They have to have a finance department, right? They have to have their own CFO. They have to have a support infrastructure. They have to have a beta test infrastructure. They have to have things that aren't directly related to just the development of these new games. They have their own licensing team, right? Well, if I can take some of those things and I say, Arcade1up, I just want you to focus on getting the designs for the games and getting the retail partners. We at Atari will worry about your HR problems. We at Atari will worry about your general ledger and your finance stuff. That's all commodity services. We can do that with our company. We'll provide you sales support because we already have that infrastructure. We already have a team. We'll just kind of merge yours into ours and we'll take that over time. You've got these things that you can do in a shared services model that release that expense from Arcade1up. Now your profit margins go up on those cabs, right? And in addition, you're able to leverage the bigger brand to bring in more licenses, which gives you more games. So there's a lot of benefits to grabbing that. Plus, Arcade1up, we keep hearing they have all these licenses, right? That's a huge asset that nobody else has. If they've secured all these licenses, depending on the company, that alone could be worth the investment. Those license transfer to you. Now suddenly you can take advantage. And so, I mean, hell, you could buy the company just for the licenses and get rid of everybody. Not saying it would be smart to do that, but that is a tactic somebody could take. We are going to buy it. We're going to take the brand. We're going to take the licenses, and we're just going to start from square one. We're going to use our designers to make new cabs. We're going to, use your brand, use your contracts into all these retail stores and everything and go from there. And so, you know, just depends on how much you value those license agreements. And, from what we've seen, they've got some pretty good licenses. So lots to think about there, all that good stuff. But that's my hot take on there's more value in Arcade1up than just their sales and just what they have. Those licensing have value, right? Because they're exclusive. Nobody else can produce that stuff in that scale. Chris says it makes sense what's being said. Pay off current debts, sell off a few big orders to like Costco, and then sell the company with a much better debt to income ratio. Yeah, most companies have debt. Absolutely. In fact, you're often, as you get to be a bigger company, and certainly like we love to say Arcade1up isn't a big company. It's definitely a larger midsize, in my opinion. They're doing annual sales of 100 million, basically, at least last year. So it's not a big company, but it's a sizable it's a mid-sized company. I don't know how sizable. It's a mid-sized company, I'll say. For sure, sales wise. Doesn't mean profit margins are that big if they exist at all. Thor KC says it's going to be any better than the Atari Pocket Player I already have. Talking about that game station, I assume. The home arcade market has diminished for mass-produced products. It absolutely has, especially as inflation is making everything more expensive. Again, another headwind for Arcade1up and why they might need more cash, right? You can't produce a cab that retails for $300 unless you strip everything away. And we've demanded more and more stuff. Their effort to keep prices down to keep it under $500 because that seems to be the point at which people like abandon them, means their profit margins are shrinking along with that in all likelihood, right? So as the good cost of raw materials go up because of inflation, their profit margins go down, or they got to pass that on to us. But at products this expensive, there is a price point in which consumers aren't willing to take on that extra burden. And Arcade One Up found that out pretty well last year, I think, which is why they've worked really hard to keep things under that amount for the last year and a half. 4K CEO, you have the other Atari unit. Sorry, thought you bought the Atari Evercade. the Not sure what the difference will be in the games list or features. Mickey A. Mickey, aka Mike Yoon, says, "What is the time remaining on their license agreements? We don't have any idea. They could have lost a bunch already. That's been rumored. They could be perpetual. They're not going to be perpetual forever, but if they do certain things, that's maybe why we get a new NBA Jam every year, because their license agreement could say they have to produce X number. So there's some loophole, something they have to do with them, but um, they are pretty valuable. We know they gobbled up a bunch and just sat on them, right? And so some probably came really cheap because they were first mover to market, and they were probably able to get really favorable terms on a lot of licenses because people looked at them and probably went, "Why the hell would somebody want to make 3/4 arcades for people's homes? This is nuts." And yeah, you want to license Tempest? Nobody's even talked about Tempest in 20 years. Sure, have at it. You just don't know what happened back then. And then Arcade One Up in a year sells a crap ton of these things, becomes a big name overnight, and suddenly everybody's like, "Oh crap, those things are worth money." But now they've got favorable terms. So some bad, some good. Just hire Danny. He'll turn the company around. He will. Did it say what is the loan term? So these are very short-term loans, Kevin. So they're designed to be paid back within that window, right? So if let's say you know, net 90 is probably the worst you're ever going to see. I doubt Arcade One Up has a net 90 with Kokum. I kind of went that route because it's as far out as probably you're ever going to see. More likely they're on net 30, net 60 maybe if they gave them really favorable terms, but more likely it's probably net 30. Most companies will not extend debt longer than that. Um, and so 30 days, right? If it's due Arcade One Up in 30 days, Kokum's going to pay them the second they get, or SLR will give Arcade One Up money the second Arcade One Up gives them the PO, and then that company's still expected to pay SLR in that net 30 time frame. And so it's when they get outside of that that Arcade One Up has more problems to worry about. Danny, of course, talking about him being hired at Arcade One Up and Pocket Player, or KC. All right, just skimming through here. I don't really have to click on them in order to read them to myself, which is also why the idea of New Way Toys cab for sub $1,000 isn't much of a possibility unless they don't want to make any profit. Yeah, I mean, that's the trouble. They like quality, right? And they're going to do it right. So it's going to cost money. The question is, do you value it? Like, New Wave Toys released your favorite cab and it's $9.99. Would you buy it? And it's, say, 15/16. It's not totally full size, but it's bigger than 3/4. Maybe it's around the XL or maybe slightly larger than XL. I'd probably buy it. Like, I don't wanna lie. Like, if they release one, now I won't be buy it would be nuts to say I'm gonna buy every one they release, but if they do one that's really a game I like, $1,000 is high, but it's the game you really want and in the perfect replica. I'd be hard pressed to say no, right? Unless it's something that you can find. Again, even a real full size, very heavy CRTs, all that stuff. If they make one that is lightweight, LCDs, still big, still really close to the original, you know, $1,000 isn't cheap, but man, it would be the right cab and the right look. It would be hard to say no if it was a game I liked. If it's a game I don't really care about, yeah, it's gonna be easy to say no. So that's their real problem. Are they gonna do the real obscure titles knowing they have to sell 3 to 5,000 of them at $1,000 a piece? That becomes a lot harder. So NBA Jam Slim Katie is just repurposed casino cades. That definitely seems what it feels like, right? They have a bunch of the bottom parts and said, "How can we manipulate the top in order to make it to slap a screen on there and release it and just get rid of the stuff?" It's certainly possible. It'd be hilarious. I think it might have been Michael B or P Dubs. I don't remember. It might have been P Dubs who talked about it. If one of you guys gets one, you should film yourself peeling the sticker off the side and see if there's Casino Cade art underneath it, because it would be funny. Um, New toy focuses on arcade accuracy, and they seem to be doing pretty well selling cabs. Yeah. I would love to be proven wrong, but I think only sub 1,000 new wave toy full sizes to get GRS arcade stick combo and DIY pedestal. Yeah. How much is the 20 million is just to keep the company afloat? Again, it's all guessing. It could be entirely they're out of cash and they need it. That's reading between the lines of the statement that Dora made to Alliance was they had supply chain issues, and it's 2024. It's not COVID. Supply chain issues are all but gone. And so supply chain issue she's talking about is money. that their supply chain is they couldn't afford to get the supplies in the chain. Uh Again, opinion. But I bet it's a 9-month loan. Those factoring loans are usually weekly payments. Because the capital isn't fully going to new licenses or rehashes. Um, Israel says, "Thank you for doing the research you do for us on a daily. Much appreciated. Appreciate that." I also want to give where I got this. Like I put it in the description. This was posted today by John D in his AMA chat. That's that. I think it was early afternoon today, so it was out there. That's where I first saw it and started looking into it. Wanted to share with you guys. And so I know some of the other guys had people send it to them, but that's where it is. So if you're not in that AMA chat, I highly recommend it. A lot of news gets dropped in there by various people, and it's a good conversation. So, I want to tell you where I got it, which is in that AMA chat. That's where I found out about this. I did not find out about it through news searches or anything else. It was in that public AMA chat where I first heard the news. Or I think it's just operating cash costs and rehashes. Jason says, "I've said it before. I don't think the scaled up wood cabs have to be bulletproof. People want accurate gameplay." I agree. Honestly, Jason, my opinion is if they use the exact same MDF as Arcade1up, I would be okay with it because super lightweight. Looks like the cab. Yeah, bigger. Probably needs some more braces in there, but the XLs look great. The XL Pac-Man looks great. It's lightweight. I can still move it around just by myself. I don't need somebody else coming in. I don't need big dollies or things to get it down in my basement and all this stuff. New Wave Toys does it as a flat pack, not like they do the Replicades where it comes in a replica crate. That would be very expensive. They don't need to make it that accurate. They're going to have to cut some corners. But so you use the smaller, cheaper MDF, and I know people give it crap, but at a bigger size, it becomes more stable. And as long as it has the look and feel of the original, again, if they're leveraging lens controls, you got high quality controls, you got their great screens and their ROM technology, it would be so awesome. Because they'll do the important things right so that it looks and feels like the original without making it weigh 8,000 pounds. Uh, yeah, I'd like to buy. I'd buy it if the title is what I'd want. Yeah, we're gonna spend all that money on at the casino. She needs to be taken out of power. Well, that's why I'm running to be the next president and CEO of Arcade1up. So, as Arcade1up says, get loud. Make sure MidCap knows that it's time to make Arcade1up great again. MG says you're very jiggly tonight. Do you need AUP? No. So I've mentioned this to a few people. I have had a bad sciatica problem for God going on 6 months now. So I'm standing up and in order to alleviate the pain, and that causes me to fidget a little bit as I shift around. So that's why I'm not sitting down and being still. I just kind of standing up. So I don't say that for sympathy or anything, because as long as I'm standing up, I have no pain. But it does make me kind of wiggle around. So the longer I'm up, the more fidgety and moving around I do, especially because I got to have my hand down and I'm tilted weird sometimes. Adam Kalb says, let's revisit what titles the community would like to see from A1 Up. What what are we going on, man? It's been over an hour. So I'm probably gonna wrap things up here, go quickly because I don't want to ignore anybody in the chat, but I really appreciate everybody dropping by. Get yourself the TENS 3000 for it. So I don't know what that is, but I will look into it. Because it's sucks that it hasn't gone away in so long. And the basically eat fistfuls of ibuprofen all the time, all the time, which is definitely not good for me. And Kevin Clausen, once again, $2, the sympathy super chat. Again, not looking looking for the sympathy, but I very much appreciate it, and thank you very much, Kevin. He says, Thor KC, fellow Kansas Citian, says maybe we will get lucky and they grew enough brain to use some of that 20 million to release Smash TV Robotron. Maybe that's certainly what Michael B wants, right? And I know the community is really, really hyped for a Smash TV. So would love to see it for all of you big Smash TV and Robotron fans. I would just love to see anything new from Arcade1up that isn't a generic multicade. But that's why we want to make Arcade1up great again, right? Man, now another super chat. Jason in for the campaign fund. We are on our way to making fundraising. I don't know what the term is, right? What is it they always say? We're about near a reporting deadline. We've, got to get the fundraising in now so we can say how much money the fundraising goal is made. Weird. The campaign nonsense this time of year is so crazy. But very much appreciate the super chat, Jason, and the support. And one, as always, I should be super chatting you as the mod extraordinaire of YouTube and the home arcade space. You are the glue that keeps this community going. So, hat tip to you, and you need a way for us to super chat you back. Jim the Pacer says, fingers crossed, get an inversion table. And I have tried everything you can think of. So I'm just hoping it just goes away eventually. Wow, that campaign must be $6 by now. Indeed. But again, everybody, thank you very much for joining us tonight. If you haven't smashed the like button already, please do so on your way out. I would sincerely appreciate it. Helps with the algorithm, helps with all that YouTube stuff. And, look forward to talking to you all Saturday. Even though it's Labor Day weekend, I have nothing going on. So we will use it to premiere and announce Agenda 1 Up. What is our strategy when we are president and CEO of Arcade1up and the administration moves in? We will talk about that on Saturday. Hope to see you then. And until next time, have fun.